are listening to part 41 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. You know, usually when I teach about the 7 medicines, I'm restricted to a fairly short time period. And I get to the medicine that we're at now, which is pharmaceutical medicine, and I say something like, don't use drugs. And we go on from there. Or maybe if I had a little more time, I might, explicate a little bit and really say, well, how are we going to define a drug? I would put supplements in the category of drugs. I would put essential oils in the category of drugs. And I would also, like we talked about with the category of herbal stimulants and herbal sedatives, I would certainly have like a range there so that we could see that some drugs are kinder or easier on us than other drugs are. But I wonder if you've ever heard of taking a drug holiday. And I thought that this was a very interesting idea. It's kind of coming up in medical circles now. I think the statistic is that of Americans over the age of 65, more than half are taking 5 or more drugs on a daily basis. It's kind of an astonishing characteristic there. And so this MD decided that with some of his patients, he was going to see what happened if they went off their drugs. And he basically selected patients who were having problematic side effects with the drugs that they were taking. And he says that, amazingly enough, he has found that a great many of them seem to get better when they stop taking their drugs. He says, there comes a point in our aging process when our physiology changes. And sometimes that can mean that there's more illness, but in many cases it actually means our problems start to diminish. Too often, doctors overlook the option of de-prescribing or discontinuing medications in older people. A recent review of more than 24 studies in which patients discontinued medication, including sedatives like Valium and blood pressure drugs, found that people did surprisingly well when they stopped taking their drugs. Their adverse symptoms abated, and their health overall greatly improved. So we might want to think about taking a holiday, a vacation from drugs, and seeing what happens. I know that frequently when I talk to people about using herbs instead of drugs, one of the things that I see is a reaction that people get afraid that something bad might happen if they stop taking their drugs. So I was glad to find that this review of quite a few studies found, in fact, not only no adverse effects, but real improvement in health. Now, they're not all drugs can we just say goodbye to, but a great many of them, and that's what we're doing here. We're really going through those drugs, step by step, drug category by drug category, and having a sense of what could we use instead? How can we move back from pharmaceutical medicine and back into alternative medicine and use some herbs instead? I also wanted to mention, and perhaps you've heard about this or read about this, Gemini, that there's a growing crisis with the drug shortages in America.
I have heard that, yes.
Yeah.
Especially antibiotics.
Antibiotics and a wide variety of different drugs. There just seem to be not enough of them. And, of course, when we get in a situation like that, then people tend to stockpile, which makes it even less. So this is for me, one of the biggest reasons that I really got interested in herbal medicine in the first place was that I have this very strong independent streak and don't like to put myself in a situation where someone else is totally in control. So if I put myself in a situation where I'm taking a drug to deal with a health problem, and then suddenly I can't get the drug, I have no control. Whereas if I'm taking an herb to help with my problem, and I can't get the herb most of the time, I can grow that herb or find that herb growing wild. And where I can't, I can usually trade with somebody. Hooray for the internet.
Yes.
Yes. So let's continue looking into antivirals. And we spent some time with antibiotics. And I talked about Stephen Herod Booner's wonderful book on antibiotics. And then I mentioned that he has a companion volume on herbal antivirals. And I'm so pleased that Stephen has taken the time and the effort to do all of this research and to write all of this down for us. It is just so useful to have these books just right at hand in your library, so that, none of us, and even the best herbalist that I know, has it all in their mind. By having reference volumes like Herbal Antibiotics and Herbal Antivirals by Stephen Herod Booner, when you get to the point where you need something like that, you have all of the information right there at your fingertips. He's gone through, he's looked at all the studies. He's pulled out the very, very best herbs for us. So in his book, Antivirals, Stephen says these are the top 7 antiviral herbs. He says, don't get the feeling that these are the only ones that there are. I tend to like really broad spectrum antivirals that are good against a wide range of viruses. But there are others that have a much more narrow range and that really seem to be effective only in certain ways against certain viruses. He doesn't mention, but I think it's interesting to note here that people have heard that lemon balm is effective against the herpes virus. So there's an antiviral herb, lemon balm, Melissa officinalis. And when people hear or read that it's effective against the herpes virus, they kind of generalize and they say, well, that must mean if I drink lemon balm tea, it will get rid of the herpes virus. It's not actually so. It seems to only be effective topically. That a topical application of lemon balm in some base will actually kill herpes on contact, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work inside or generally or systemically, nor does it mean that it will kill any other virus, nor does it mean that plants that are related to lemon balm will kill herpes or will kill any other virus. It doesn't mean that they won't, but the fact that lemon balm does not give us proof through generalization. And we find that this often happens. And I think that that's why Stephen likes to stick with the more generalized herbs, because then you can generalize around them. But it is interesting to know that herbs can be that specific, that they can target a specific virus, but only in a specific way. So Stephen's top 7 antiviral herbs are Chinese skullcap, elder, ginger, hootenea, isatis, licorice, and lomatium. Of that list, I would suspect that the words that most people were best able to hear were elder, ginger, and licorice.
Yes, and skullcap.
And Chinese skullcap. There you go. All right. And the hootenea, isatis, and lomatium sound like things that have come in on unidentified flying objects. I was at my the chat group that I run once a month, and I was mentioning to them that I was going to go teach down in the Ozarks at a UFO conference. And one of them asked if that meant that was an unidentified fern object.
It's cute.
And since she could spell it, we knew it was F-E-R-N. But we could also kind of hear her saying fern. Is it a fern object with that drawl?
Right.
But no, they are not fern objects at all, or even foreign objects at all. So we've talked about elder before. here at Time Monk Radio. And we talked about elder. I would guess some years ago. Do you remember when it was we talked about elder? We were talking about colds and flus, right?
Yes, like with the elderberries and even elderflowers.
Elderberry and even elderflowers. Exactly. And we talked at that point about really powerful studies that have been done showing that elderberries are quite specific against virtually every strain of flu that they have put it up against. H1N1 kills it. H5N1 kills it. H3N2 kills it. Kills influenza A, kills influenza B. It kills swine influenza. It kills turkey influenza. It kills 4 types of HIV. It kills feline immunodeficiency virus, herpes simplex, tobacco mosaic virus, Haemophilus, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Group C and Group G streptococci, Heliobacter pylori, Bacillus cereus, Pseudomonas, Salmonella, Shigella, Mycobacterium. Those are some bad customers there in that list that I just read.
Yes.
Very bad customers. And elderberry has scientific evidence showing that at least in the lab it can kill all of these things. Elderflowers have a much smaller list, influenza A and B, Staphylococcus, Salmonella, Pseudomonas, and Mycobacterium. Even the elder leaves have the ability to kill a fair list of viruses. So, even though elderberry is a fruit and it is completely safe and it can be used by anyone of any age in any situation, it is a serious antiviral herb, especially when it comes to the flu. But those were a bunch of other viruses in that list too. And again, I don't remember that. That's why I have reference books, so I can go and look it up. But I will make a mental note. Someone with herpes simplex, usually cold sores, perhaps elderberry could be the very thing that could help them. We could try smearing it on their lips. Maybe some elderberry in that lemon balm lip balm. We get some elderberry and some lemon balm and put it on our lips. That should really take care of it, huh?
Yes, and it would be delicious.
And it would be absolutely delicious, wouldn't it? Elderberry tincture is extremely easy to make. And I have a YouTube showing me making elderberry tincture. You can make it with dried berries. The dried berries are easily available for sale, and they are pretty inexpensive as well. So more elderberry, less flu vaccines, and that will help us. Ginger. I was really surprised that Stephen included ginger. I didn't think of ginger as an antiviral at all. But he says it's been used around the world for treating a large range of viral infections, including colds, flus, hepatitis, herpes, yellow fever, measles, chickenpox, and other viruses, including Epstein-Barr virus and cytomegalovirus. Wow. He has a long list, which I will not read through here, of antimicrobial actions, or actually the microbes or the bacteria that ginger can kill, and it is more than half a page, 3 columns across, including Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Shigella, Heliobacter, Haemophilus, Escherichia. Again, Candida, really things that are going to make us unhappy, and yet ginger is pretty common to most of us. Stephen goes on to say that in China, ginger is considered two separate and distinct medicines. So there is the medicine of the fresh ginger, which is antiviral, and there's the medicine of the dried ginger, which is more digestive. Have you used ginger in both forms?
I typically use ginger in fresh form. I've not used it dried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got a really savory and attractive taste, I find, when it's fresh.
Mm-hmm. I love it fresh.
Yeah, there's a dish at a local Chinese restaurant, and they actually slice the ginger, but slices of ginger in the vegetable dish.
Mm.
And yes, sliced pretty thin, but it's not awful or overpowering. But once the ginger dries, it gets much hotter and much whoa! You would think, it's kind of an aromatic. You dry it, it would have less. But in fact, the ginger in some ways has more of a bite and is very strong. Stephen Herod Booner says, think of ginger as a respiratory antiviral circulatory stimulant. We got that? A respiratory antiviral circulatory stimulant. It calms nausea, reduces diarrhea, reduces fever, reduces cold chills, reduces inflammation in the bronchia, thins mucus, reduces coughing as much as a codeine cough syrup will, ameliorates anxiety, and provides analgesic relief equal to or better than ibuprofen.
That's impressive.
That certainly has a lot to recommend it, doesn't it?
Yes, I was just sitting here thinking that ginger and honey would probably feel wonderful for a cough.
Don't you think?
And a sore throat. Yes.
And how hard is that? This is what I mean when I say that herbal medicine is people's medicine. We can march ourselves right out to the store, get some fresh ginger. Just about every store I've been in sells fresh ginger, jar of honey, come home and make ourselves a wonderful antiviral tea to help counter a cold or a flu. And it will do us as much good as a codeine cough syrup and provide better relief than ibuprofen when we get into painkillers, which is our next stop on the Drug Express. We're going to be seeing that there are some incredibly big problems with ibuprofen and other painkillers, whereas here is mild-mannered, happy ginger ready to help us out at any point. Stephen says, if you start taking ginger the very day that you sense a cold or a flu coming on, that he guarantees you that you'll cut your sick time down to 3 days or less.
Wow.
He says you have to jump on it. You can't just say, oh, I'll just wait and see. It says just as soon as you know that that's what's happening, jump on using that ginger right away. Now, my teachers always had me slice the ginger and put it into boiling water. Stephen says, however, if you want to use ginger as an antiviral, the fresh juice cannot be surpassed in effectiveness. About 30 minutes after drinking the fresh juice as a hot tea, the compounds are going to enter your bloodstream and reach peak concentration in about 60 minutes. They will then begin to decline. So you have to keep taking the fresh juice every 2 or 3 hours to keep the constituents as high as possible. And here's his recipe for making fresh ginger juice tea. Juice 1 or more pieces of ginger. The total should be about the size of a medium carrot, or about 4 pieces, the size of your thumb, and save everything. You're going to keep the plant matter that's left over, and you're going to have the juice. All right. you're going to combine a quarter cup of the fresh juice that you get with 12 ounces of hot water, a tablespoon of honey, a squeeze of lime juice, and then the leftover plant matter that you have from juicing the root, you're going to put in between 1 and 2 cups of hot water, depending on how much stuff you have, and steep it for up to 8 hours, and then strain it. And use that just like you would the ginger juice. So in other words, first you have the actual juice, and you'll use a quarter cup of that at a time. And when that's used up, you'll have the ginger plant material, which you've poured a cup or two of boiling water over, and you use a quarter cup at a time of that. It's almost as good and useful as the fresh juice, just not quite. So use the fresh juice first. If you do not have a juicer to juice the ginger root, grate the ginger as finely as you can, steep in 8 to 12 ounces of hot water for 2 or 3 hours, covered tightly, and drink 4 to 6 cups daily. Got it?
I do.
A little bit more complicated than what I was taught was just slice up the ginger, chuck it in the boiling water, and turn the heat way down so it just kind of barely simmers, and clamp a tight lid on there. I was always told, keep that lid on that ginger because it's volatile, and you're going to lose the stuff. But you have to bubble it a little bit to get stuff out of it. But instead of actually bubbling it, which is basically making a decoction, what Stephen does is to juice it instead, and notice that he doesn't throw out the mark or the stuff that you get from the juicer. So don't worry if you don't have a juicer. A box grater, and the finest grate on the box grater will get you good ginger juice, and you can make it up in any of these ways. One of Stephen's top 7 antivirals in the world. In China, dried ginger is not considered an antiviral at all. Only the fresh plant is. Licorice is a plant that I don't use very much at all. Do you use licorice?
Are we speaking of licorice root?
Yes, licorice root.
Actually, yes, I tried to grow it this past year, not very successfully, I might add, but I do have it dried, and I do add it to things because it's very, very sweet, and I made a little tincture out of it.
People do like licorice because it tastes so sweet, and it has that anisey, fennel-y flavor. Of course, sometimes they say that fennel and anise taste like licorice, but we know it's licorice that tastes like them. It's not a plant that has ever attracted me at all, but I certainly recognize that lots and lots of people are attracted to it. I just kind of following along with, well, I'm not, very interested in this plant. I was then able to justify not being interested in it, in that it is very hard to grow, and it doesn't grow as a weed. And as a matter of fact, it's a plant that has to have a pretty mild climate in order to thrive. Where I live, it simply would never do. So that allowed me, also to just kind of say, oh, for the licorice. And then I learned that taking licorice consistently does bad things to our blood pressure.
Oh.
So I said, all right, well then, I just, I don't have to even deal with licorice at all. And then here comes Stephen Herod Booner saying, licorice, it's one of the best antivirals that we have. Licorice is broadly antiviral. It is active against a huge range of viruses through multiple mechanisms. It strongly inhibits the ability of many viruses to create the pores through which they enter cells. That slows or even ends viral infections right at the start. Licorice is also directly virucidal. Licorice also has the ability to stimulate the host immune system to specifically attack the invading virus. Licorice and one of its major constituents, glycyrrhizin, is especially effective against enveloped viruses, which includes herpes, poxes, toga viruses, coronavirus, hepatitis viruses, rabidoviruses, and he goes on and on and on, retroviruses. It is not active against every virus in every one of these groups, but most of them. In fact, Chinese skullcap in licorice and licorice in combination should be able to stop any viral infection. That's quite a statement, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It makes me go, well, darn, Susan. Now you're going to have to really start to like licorice. You'd have to figure out, to be told this is one of the most powerful antivirals in the world with one of the greatest and broadest sweeps of antiviral protection. Wow. Licorice is effective against influenza A, including H1N1, H2N2, H5N1, da-da-da-da-da. It is spectacular against respiratory viruses, against encephalitis, West Nile, yellow fever, dengue, viral pneumonia, bronchitis, enterovirus, rotavirus, adenoviruses, Coxsackie virus, cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex 1, herpes simplex 2, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, hepatitis E, and most likely hepatitis D, Epstein-Barr, polio, measles. And I'm not even reading all of them, because some of them, I figure if I don't know what they are, you probably don't know what they are either.
That's a good bet.
But I'm just sitting here going, oh my gosh. In addition, licorice is antimicrobial, and it kills Shigella, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Salmonella, Enterococcus, Chlamydia. It just goes on and on and on. Licorice is an herb that I am going to have to get to know better and to see if I can find a way to like the taste of it. Stephen says licorice can even be used to treat oral bacterial problems. It's especially good for people who are dealing with gum disease. Note, licorice is better used in combination than alone. I simply would not recommend that licorice be used as a single medicinal. Traditionally, licorice has been used as a medicine for more than 5,000 years. Its name literally means sweet root, Glycyrrhiza. In China, it's gang cow, and there's over a 3,000-year history of it being used. So I'm going to have to get more into licorice, and maybe we'll do a show later on where I can give you some report on what I have found out more about licorice. Stephen says there is an indigenous species in America that was used by indigenous tribes for just about all the same purposes: sore throat, chest pain, swelling, cough, stomachache, fevers, toothache, skin sore, spitting blood, and a general tonic. He says there are over 2,000 citations on PubMed alone talking about the antiviral and antimicrobial properties of licorice. And once again, we have come to the end of our time together. We'll come back next week and talk about the herbal antis. Green blessings, Gemini.
Thank you, Susan. This concludes part 41 of our series, The 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.